The German consumer is a little bit different than the American consumer naturally, but I think the Germans always have their eye on what America's doing.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Jamie Pearson, president of New Holland Group. Jamie, thanks for taking the time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to talk to Jamie. I mean, her reputation speaks for herself. I think Superwoman of Canada, cannabis is kind of some of the terms have been thrown around. So really excited to pick her brain and kind of dive into some international topics I think we have on the docket. How are you doing today, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I think the international topics continue to be one of big interest. And I wonder if we're approaching the time where this continues to be one where it's companies really start to make the move forward. So, Jamie, before we dive into the fun stuff, we're going to have to put you on the record, a little East Coast, West Coast battle. And I think it's really important to focus first, education-wise, the school is super important. So from a university standpoint, is there a coast that maybe is more important to you?
Right now, I would definitely say the East Coast is more important to me. I don't know why that's making you so happy, but look, it hasn't been perfect anywhere. We know the good quality product is coming out of California and Oregon, where the terroir to grow is optimal. But we all know that all the weight gets moved on the East Coast and always has.
Love it. Love it. So for our listeners unfamiliar about you, can you give a little background of yourself and how you find your way to the cannabis space?
Sure. I grew up in a small town on a cattle ranch in Montana, and my parents still live there. On my mom's side, my first cousin is DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill. And my dad has been growing cannabis. I'm 55. He's been growing cannabis 57 years. He's a Vietnam vet with PTSD, doesn't drink alcohol. And I didn't know any different, but I grew up my whole life with my dad being a wake and bake pot smoker and got really comfortable around cannabis, being in the normal course of my family. So when Muggs lit a joint on Saturday Night Live, I was in law school. And fast forward to about 2013, 14, he and I bought a farm in Sonoma, in a little town called Sebastopol. With this grand scheme, as cannabis was spreading across the US, we were going to get in the game. And we quickly learned we're not cultivators. We're not scientists. We're brand builders. We built a couple of brands. Fire swept through. Farmers got evacuated. We decided, okay, too much. We sold. And then we focused on the brand side. And simultaneously, I had found the company Bang to do a deal with Cypress. That product that we created, the collaboration, sold out, did great. Bang asked me to stay on. I was with Bang for 7 years. The last 3 years, I was the CEO and president. It had gone public, so I was running a public company, which wasn't something I thought I would be doing ever in my life. And a couple of years ago, I left Bang after 7 years and started a consulting firm helping companies and brands do what I did for Bang, which was cross borders, expand into Europe. And I call it, kissing frogs. I went around the country, met everybody, decided who was going to be our Prince Charming for that state. And when I left Bang, we were in 7 states. We had signed an 11-state deal with Trulieve. We were the number one chocolate in Canada. I had brought the brand over to Europe into 9 countries through 4 distribution agreements. And that was before novel foods hit. That was before shit hit the fan with CBD over in Europe. And, it's cannabis. So everything changes. It's dynamic. And that was really the start. So I've been in it about 12 years. And the last 2 years, I've just been consulting with MSOs, governments, trade organizations, and lots of brands and e-commerce companies. So it's been really, really interesting. And I'm happy I landed in consulting because it's a natural place for someone who is a teacher. I taught middle school and high school honors English, and I taught German at the University of Oregon. So I'm a natural teacher, and consulting works well for me.
I love it. And I know one of the areas you focus on now is Germany. And I think a lot of people have understandings of what Germany is, but I would love to get your perspective, who's on boots on the ground all the time. So take us now, exactly today. Where is Germany and kind of what you think the future unfolds for them?
Today, At this very moment, Germany, I don't know if you saw the riots, there's been political protests going on around the resurgence of the far right that kind of mimics what's happening in our country, but they're not having it. Their history is a little too fresh, I think, for what's happening worldwide, Brexit, all of this kind of movement to this nationalism. The Germans are not interested in that. Well, their government fell apart. The so-called traffic light coalition, which was coined because you have the red, the green, and the yellow, which kind of indicate where on the spectrum, the political spectrum, these parties were. And the coalition was pretty broad, and it fell apart. And they're going to have a vote on February 23rd. We'll see who the new coalition ends up being and why that's. I mean, it's obviously interesting for everything, but for cannabis particularly, what had gone on in Germany is first they decriminalized, which per usual emboldens the illicit market. So they've got a robust illicit market going on. They did a pilot program for recreational, not a pilot program, excuse me. They launched a recreational program with social clubs. And the social clubs are not social like we're thinking about Barcelona social clubs. They're more like the grow cooperatives that we know from the early days of California, where someone's a caregiver. So these cooperatives can have up to 500 members. They can grow cannabis, and you can go purchase up to 50 grams of cannabis per month out of your cooperative. Doesn't require anything in the medical program. That's their recreational right now. Then their medical program, this is the piece that I think people in the US kind of need to wrap their heads around. The German medical program, they took cannabis off the narcotics list. And so I will say that again, the fact that cannabis is a non-narcotic in Germany means that the medical program has predictably exploded. And then I want to take your American lens off and put your German lens on, or put your European lens on. Europeans are used to single payer health care. I know that everyone in the US thinks that, socialized medicine is a dirty word. We're the only country in a developed nation that does not have socialized medicine. So the citizens of Germany, Spain, France, all of those European nations are used to anything medical. You go to the doctor, you get a prescription, you go to the pharmacy, and either the state-sponsored health insurance or your private health insurance pays for it. The medical program in Germany has gone bonkers because now everyone can prescribe your access to cannabis. And if you're a consumer of cannabis, would you rather go to your plug on the street and not know if there's fentanyl involved, or go through the brain damage of becoming part of a cooperative and only having access to whatever that cooperative produces, or don't spend a single penny of your disposable income, go to your doctor, that's free, get a prescription, that's free, and then go to the pharmacy and get a menu put in front of you. And you can talk to your doctor about, I don't want to smoke, I want to eat edibles. And if you can find the right compounding pharmacy, you can get edibles made, you can get a vape pen, you can get whatever, and the government pays for it. So, of course, it's not that simple. There's dust settling around all of that, but that's what's evolving. That's what's emerging. It's emerging in the way that you would expect cannabis to emerge, though. So it's things like there's a company out there called Bloomwell. You can do a telemedicine doctor appointment because, again, it's not a narcotic. So think about it like getting erectile dysfunction medication, or getting, hair loss medication, get a minoxidil, or get, what is the erectile dysfunction medicine called? Viagra. Sorry. Viagra, Wegovy, Ozempic. What's happening over here in the US is we can just go fill out a form online and the stuff can come to your door. Well, that's what the companies, and a lot of them have American members of them, are saying, wait, this is just like that. Now what's emerging in the German market through the medical side is you can go do a telemedicine appointment through email, basically, or through WhatsApp or online, have the prescription sent right to the pharmacy, and the meds come right to your door. So it's just like having a plug. You don't have to go into the pharmacy and tell everyone you're using cannabis because there's still a stigma. But it's really opened up some incredible opportunities for the companies over in Germany, and the medical market has just gone bonkers. Now, last piece, the real recreational market, the one we're used to, where you go to the dispensary and you can have everything from edibles to drinks to concentrates. We need the government to get back together because that was the fourth component of the German law that was supposed to get rolled out at the end of last year. And when the government dissolved, that obviously didn't happen. And we're all just kind of waiting with bated breath to see how that's going to roll out, who's going to end up in power, and how do they feel about cannabis? What are we going to end up having? What I predict is that they're already seeing the implications on their budgets. You know, they're addicted to the tax dollars, and I think they've already have the pilot program pretty well laid out at the governmental level, and they just want to roll it out and implement it because they've got companies like Sanity Group. Finn Hensel did a deal with Organigram out of Canada, and they've already got permission from multiple municipalities to get going. And the one, tenet of it is they want it to actually collect data. So the government of Germany, rather than putting out their full law and saying, okay, we threw this spaghetti on the wall, we're going to see what happens. They're like, what we're going to do is put a very controlled program together with operators that we know are good in the world, and then connect it with universities. So they're all connected to universities, collect this data, and then let's determine what is right for our country. So they're kind of dipping their toe in the water. We're all excited about what's happening, and there are companies making big moves in the background, getting real estate tied up, getting license documents together, waiting for the license program to be published so they know what to produce. But believe me, you'll see some quick movement the minute the government invites it.
The one thing that you made really clear, though, at least from my opinion, it seems like the German government has a understanding of if the medical program is thriving, then maybe we shouldn't look to kibosh it. We should consider bringing it in. Do you think that will greatly influence whoever takes power on how that unfolds?
Here's the rub. The tax dollars aren't coming in from the medical market, right? And so
it's losing money because they're paying for it.
Right. And so what they're saying is they're looking at other countries and they're saying, okay, we also know that not everybody's using cannabis for medical reasons, right? So the people that would like to use cannabis instead of alcohol, and that brings me to where our countries are similar, is that those patterns that we're seeing of the Gen Zers and the millennials drinking less alcohol, being more aware of what they put in their bodies. I mean, the Germans don't allow GMOs in their food. They're leading that charge of wanting the clean eating and, putting less poisons in their body. So you're seeing that same shift away from alcohol over there. And, obviously Germany's a big beer drinking country. So one of the people I'm working with is developing a way to infuse beverages with cannabinoids legally in Europe. And, just like beverage has gone big in the US, we're not anywhere near ready to launch beverage in Europe, but it's going to be big.
Do you think Germany's favoring kind of building their own internal supply chain to kind of manage those, or are they specific portions of that 4-tier system are outsourcing it from other countries in terms of importing the product?
Well, what happened initially, and you got to keep in mind, world events impact all of this. There's a war in Ukraine, and Germany was pretty dependent on Russian oil for a lot of their power. And they made a commitment to get off of nuclear power a long time ago. So this oil was really important. They've been weaning themselves off slowly but surely. Actually, I would say fairly quickly. They're no longer really super dependent on it. But in part of that, when they first rolled out the medical law a few years ago, it was not allowed to grow cannabis in Germany. They didn't want to put any more strain on the already strained utility systems that were providing heat and fuel to their citizens. So they were requiring that most of it be imported. There was an exception. There were 4 companies that had the right to grow a limited amount of cannabis in country. So one of the tenets of the law that was just passed last year lifted that. So anybody can grow in Germany now, and that has EU GMP, let's be specific, pharmaceutical grade cannabis. So if you have an EU GMP certified facility, and you got to think about Tyvek suit, this is legitimate pharmaceutical grade cannabis, not the stuff in that we see in the US. A lot of it's, grown very cleanly, but it wouldn't pass EU GMP. Over there, if it's EU GMP, anybody can have it in Germany now. And so that has exploded as well. And there were also 3 strains limit on those 4 growers, and that has been lifted as well. So now you've got more, it's basically more clean supply going in that's within Germany. So to your point, yes, they're starting to see how import is impacting the supply chain. And I just spoke in Iceland last October. The Icelandic government is looking at, they got geothermal energy. Would it be possible for them to grow beautiful indoor cannabis with free energy and supply the European continent? They could put a big dent in it, and they're definitely looking at that. And you've got a lot of product coming from Colombia and Australia, and it all comes in through Portugal. Portugal has the EU GMP facilities, cheap labor, and less taxation. So then what happens is the product comes to Portugal, it gets converted to EU GMP standard, tested, and then plugged into the German medical market. So the supply chains that currently exist, they're clunky, and I predict that they're going to get streamlined over the course of the next few years.
But those clunky, streamlined operations that you're talking about is the primed, beautiful opportunity that the U.S. operators who have experience kind of putting those together can apply some of their experience. So when they reach out to these big MSOs, Jamie, and they're like, hey, like, we're thinking about this, is it more of like a collaborative approach of like, we're thinking we're going to take the skill set we used in X state and apply it here? Or is it more of like, you see an opportunity given like the framework and where the supply chain is, and say, based on your team's previous experience, this is where I'd recommend?
It really just depends on what your expertise is. So for example, Aurora and Curaleaf have been making moves all throughout Europe for a really long time. So you've already got MSOs, Organogram, Village Farms, I guess those are Canadian LPs, but you do have the MSOs. Some of them are staying head down. Truliev's not looking at Europe right now that I'm aware of. GTI, I don't see them, making any moves that are visible yet over in Europe. But, Truliev's trying to win Florida. They got other fish they're frying. And, Ben Kovlar's looking at doing a deal with a big beverage company. He just bought that Senorita beverage. So I think some of the MSOs are just trying to, win the race where they're at. Curaleaf is looking to really be a global player and is looking at making investments in those global plays. Canopy Growth made some early investments and lost their shirts, I think, because their business model, they were early. I think the ones that waited, let everybody else lose the money and let the dust settle were smart. But I would say like there are brands who are looking to go over, multi-state brands. And you saw that Wana made a deal with Alpengroup in Switzerland to be part of that Swiss pilot program. That's a small program. They're obviously just dipping their toe in the water, getting connected, figuring out the lay of the land. And I think what's basically happening is everyone's got their eye on it and people are looking for an entree, but there's not yet room for brands because there is no recreational program, and a brand at the pharmacy that doesn't translate yet unless you have the budget to just start building name recognition. It's sort of like buying billboards all over a town before you have the ability to do anything with it because you're just trying to raise awareness. So some of these plays, these strategic plays, are smart. Curaleaf's making money over in Europe. They're selling product. They're out there operating. They just announced their big facility in the Ukraine. The Ukraine just came on medical. Tilray, Curaleaf, Aurora, they all have EU GMP certified facilities that they own and operate. So we're talking medical right now. The recreational program really doesn't exist yet. So it's early for brands, but I would say anybody that wants to get to Europe and they want to be a player, Cookies is over there right now. They're doing a lifestyle play. They've got a consumption lounge, or they used to, in Barcelona. Again, recognition, name recognition, and that's kind of the name of the game for the brands. So, what I would say to you is, depending on what you're doing, if you're a grower, if you're a processor, if you're a brand, if you're selling packaging, it wouldn't hurt you to get over to ICBC, which is the MJ Biz essentially of Europe, and start making connections.
Do you see the transition from this like robust medical market that Europe is kind of building up on right now being similar to kind of some of the state medical to recreational transitions that we've seen in America? And how do you think it's going to be different then?
I think they're going to be two very separate markets, because you got to remember the medical market in Europe is pharmaceutical,
Yeah,
right? Where the medical market in the US is medical with air quotes. It was a workaround to get the plant in people's hands
the truth.
compassionately. And so what you see in the US is the minute a state goes medical, it's just a matter of time before they go recreational, because the state wastes I don't care what state it is, they're wasting a lot of money enforcing things, when what we all know is that cannabis becomes ubiquitous when you legalize medical cannabis, because then basically and it always goes hand in hand with decriminalization. I want to just point that out. So then I go to the doctor, I get a card, I go get my cannabis. Now I'm allowed to hold it in any place, just like I could have beer in my car unopened in my grocery bag. It's not illegal to possess it. But it also means I can give it to you, because if you're 21 and I'm 21 and I possess it and you're allowed to possess it, as long as there's no sale transaction, we're all within the bounds of the law. Well, how are the cops? I mean, you set them up to fail. And ultimately, we also recognize, what are we doing? Why do we have cops going after people smoking weed? It's like, it's dumb. And it's a waste of resources. And we could actually have them, solving violent crime that's unsolved crime. And that's an interesting statistic. I just spoke with a criminal justice expert, and he touted a statistic on stage that said places that legalize cannabis for recreational use reallocate the resources, the time and money and effort of cops, and 20% more unsolved crime gets solved, violent crime. So when you think about what a waste of resources it is in these places to have our law enforcement going after people with cannabis, it's silly. But in the US, that's what happens. The medical legalization usually rolls over into a recreational legalization movement, because it's just basically easier for the government, and there's a way for them to collect more tax dollars.
That's a great statistic.
Yeah. And over in Europe, they just figured it out. They're like, yeah, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to have medical be medical, pharmaceutical, and we're going to be very careful about how we dip our toe into the recreational waters. So they're watching us. They're seeing the shit show that America is, and they're like, we're just going to do this a little differently.
As they should. So I want to go back to what you said about the brands thinking about expansion. So let's just do a hypothetical scenario to help my brain work. So let's say you're a brand here on the East Coast, you're doing really good, and you're thinking about expanding to a new state. Do you think about it as like, instead of going to, let's say, Missouri or to Michigan, they should be also considering going to Germany, as like, if we're going to expand, we should be considering international also, and it's kind of like a one-to-one, or you think about it a little different?
Well, this is what I do in my consulting business, is I help companies with their expansion strategies. And these are the very questions we're answering. And the kind of criteria that we use to make the decisions have to do with, for example, I have a client who is Hello Again, you know them. It's a vaginal suppository brand for women in menopause and women who have period pain. And that's not really a recreational product, right? That's a medical product. So for them, I'm like, let's get over there. Let's get into the UK. Let's get your products in women's hands, because all women have periods and go into menopause. It's one of the hallmarks of being, female in the United States, or in the world, on the planet Earth. That is going to be a different conversation than I'm going to have with a gummy brand that wants to expand. So, I had conversation with Wana when they were making their decision to go over into Switzerland. And the reality is, Wana had deep pockets. Wana had a brand that was already crushing across borders in the US and in Canada. They were in a little different position to go be exploratory, which is just basically expending a lot of money to figure it out, right? If you're a brand that doesn't have a lot of money to go figure it out, then what I would recommend you do is probably go look at Missouri. I would have you go look at some other market that you haven't expanded into. But another brand that I think is doing a good job is Zen Cannabis. And they're also a company I work with. And they're not really well known, but they're in 28 countries right now. They've got both hemp derived and cannabis. They're playing both roles. They're parallel processing all of this. Products are freaking amazing. I love their products. I love their branding. Took them on as a client really reluctantly in the beginning, and they were like, trust us, trust us, trust us, we're better than all the other ones. They really are. And I've just started talking about them more because the more I've worked with them, the more professional I realize they are. And I'm encouraging them to start having those conversations in the German market. They did things like when the Ukraine went medical, their CEO got on a plane, flew to the Ukraine, and figured it out. Because who else was going to do that in a war zone, right? They're fully operational in Ukraine. They're fully operational in Eastern Europe. They got most of those countries that nobody's even got their eye on. And they're operating wherever they're operating legally, where they can have a hemp derived product or, or a CBD product or whatever it is. They're building massive brand awareness because they're doing it very quietly and just conquering markets that nobody's got their eye on. Meanwhile, they're in like 7 US states and they've got an e-commerce, CBD line. Those are the type of companies that are going to be here long after all the noise because they're not spending money on throwing parties and press releases and all of that kind of stuff. So it just depends on what your strategy is, what kind of product you have, how big your team is, and how much money you've got to go accomplish your cross-border aspirations.
Who else is like Zen that is really killing it, kind of maybe a little under the radar, or anyone else that you're thinking like that person right there is kind of getting slept on just by the industry as a whole?
There's a brand called Dope Drink. I'm telling you, it's the best drink on the market. That's for me is where if you send me a bunch of product and I don't like it, we're going to part friends. And that's happened multiple times for me because if the product's not good, I don't want to rep it. Right. And I think Dope Drink is it's the best beverage I've had, and I've had them all. There are other good ones out there, but what I like about the Dope Drink is it's like, and I am a LaCroix bubbly addict. That's what I drink all day long. And it's spring water, but you don't have that bitter aftertaste, which I don't like in a cannabis beverage, like the finish being that weird bitter, like you're drinking dirt. I don't like that flavor. And they use Source, and I think they use Vertosa also. So they have figured out how to mask that flavor. It's got no sugar. It's got no salt. It's just like LaCroix. The flavors are subtle. You don't feel like you're drinking something really sweet. So they haven't overpowered it. It's a big can of water. So I always drink one before I go work out. So it's hydration, like get high while you hydrate. That's not their tagline, but it should be because that's the one I always use.
That's the plug.
It's a good plug.
Yeah, I'm going to buy those drinks after. That was a nice sell job.
Oh my God. And they come right to my door.
The winning.
Best shit ever.
I'll need that. Who is it reaching out to you, let's say that's US based, that should be thinking about going to Germany? Brand, infrastructure, it could be anybody.
I don't want to put anyone on blast, but
maybe not specifically a brand, but I'm saying it's like what product portfolio or like infrastructure style would it be? High-end cultivators? Like, is there someone in your mind you think there's an opportunity in Germany that just is not considering what is the economic opportunity in front of them?
I'm going to put my long-term hat on. If I were let's say a chain of dispensaries, I'll give you one example. Happy Monkey. You guys know them from New York, right?
Yeah.
Happy Monkey has a compelling brand. The brand is definitely speaking to the legacy market. I think they would do really well in Germany because the brand is beautiful. It has that urban feel to it. I think they would crush in Munich. They would crush in Berlin. I think they would crush in Cologne. They could probably open in Hamburg, some of the larger cities in Germany. And I think they would do better over there than they would in California. I would tell them if they were asking me, forget California. I don't know that they have any designs on that. I mean, this is just me hypothetically saying to you, if I were sitting on that brand, I would be looking to go open stores in Germany because I think it resonates. So there are other store chains that have approached me that are interested in, okay, well, when that recreational pilot program launches in Germany, what do you think? I think there would be a market for that retail play because I think, yes, there are retail experts in Germany and specifically in the German consumer. The German consumer is a little bit different than the American consumer naturally, but I think the Germans always have their eye on what America's doing. And so I think that the word monkey is going to translate. I think the word happy is going to translate. And so I think that American branding is going to do really well over there.
That makes a ton of sense. And that's what I was kind of wondering was like, how do you understand where you fit today and if you think that would translate? And brands kind of with that kind of like feel and following make a ton of sense. So this is probably an impossible question, but timing would be the sooner the better, or wait until like 2 weeks where they have the vote? What do you think?
Well, naturally, if you start now, you're going to meet the people who are making moves in the background and you're going to know where the opportunities are. I think if you start now, you're on a reconnaissance mission to go collect information and then put your strategy together. And your strategy might be, we're going to wait until X happens in the future and then pull the trigger. But you're going to know now what that trigger pulling event is. And I think the people that do that are going to have a better chance of it. But, I'm of two minds always. First mover status doesn't help a lot of people. I've seen it in cannabis in some cases be wildly successful. Trulieve is a great example. They were the kind of the first mover in Florida, and say what you will about them. I think they've just done a tremendous job of taking that brand, taking that business model and operating with efficiency. Every time I turn around, they're opening another store, another store, another store. They're doing great where that's concerned, like keeping their head down and just building. That's one example of a great first mover status, but name another one. Name another first mover that still exists. In some cases, it is so tumultuous that you can burn up a lot of money and learn some hard lessons, but maybe not make it. And I think there's some wisdom in just letting people go blaze the trail, pun intended, and then sit back and then strategically decide where you're going to enter. So it really just depends on who you are.
What do you think is the best case scenario for the vote in February in Germany? What would you think? What outcome would you prefer for the market as a whole?
If this had been November 1st and you had asked me, was I voting for Biden or Trump? I would give you the same answer. I'm not going to answer that.
Well done.
The Dolly Parton, right?
Well done. Does not fall for that Trump question, Kellen.
I was just trying to wonder, you know what I mean? I'm just I'm curious.
But nice try.
Yeah.
But nice try.
You're going to have to come hotter than that.
Yeah. No, in all seriousness, what my sources tell me is it kind of doesn't matter who you vote for over there with regard to cannabis. All of the governmental, and that's the other thing is they don't have a two-party system. You vote for your party, not for your candidate. The party then puts the candidates out there. That being said, all of the parties want cannabis for different reasons, differing reasons, and they want it to look a little different, but they're not arguing about whether cannabis should be there or not. That is kind of, they've decided that. So I don't think it matters at all. And though their issues are similar, they're having, economy issues that have resulted from liberal COVID policies that dumped, money when all the governments were panicking, not knowing if their citizens were all, going to die in this global pandemic, when you had, freezer trucks full of bodies and, COVID was at its strongest and now it's been weakened through whatever, it's all controversial because there's so much opinion out there. But, when you liken it to the flu of 1812, when everybody was dying and then it has morphed into what we now know as the common cold, that's my ultra scientific result. But I think at the time the governments were really not sure what was happening. They were keeping people at home. trying to stop the spread, to some degree, better or worse. They're all suffering from the economic impact of that pandemic now, every country on the planet, and its impact on the supply chain. And they're all just trying to scramble to figure out, how to recover. And there's been a lot of dissent in all countries from poor people who took the brunt of most of that because they were the service labor and they were the ones that were most impacted by it. So I think where we're at now is all the governments are just trying to figure it out. And you got AI coming in and all these, robotics in China. And I think it's just kind of a crazy time that we live in, and we all need more cannabis.
For sure. For sure. So we talked a lot about Germany, but what other countries is Jamie thinking about that maybe is a little farther down the pipeline, but one that you're thinking about?
Well, I will say exciting news. We're really waiting on Spain to produce their medical rules. And I think Spain will be it's a good market. I'm excited about Spain kind of finally getting into the fray. But the sleeper market that I'm super stoked about is France. France is what I would consider in using American analogies, I would say Paris is the New York of Europe, in the sense that it's fashion. It's the largest consumer of illicit cannabis in the European continent. So when France goes, you're going to see big things happen in Europe.
Do you think they'll have a better rollout than New York did?
They have a tumultuous governmental situation over there. The Germans are very orderly, and it'll all be very structured, and as it's been, and the French are just going to fight about everything. And so it'll take a while.
Talk to us what's going on at the ICBE events. I know there's some exciting stuff going on, maybe some capital raises that I think people here in the US might want to know about.
So ICBC founder Alex Rogers he saw an opportunity and very, very wisely launched a new initiative, and he calls it the Tallman House. It's called the Tallman House. And he puts on Tallman group events. So you have to join the Tallman House to participate. The individual members are $3,500 a year, I think, and the corporate members are $5,000 a year. But what the Tallman House is an event organization that puts on these events where they take entrepreneurs that are needing capital to enter into the European market or to grow in the European market. And then he combines them with the capital that's pent up in Europe, which is, there's a sign right there that Europe is a great place to look at doing business, because there is pent up capital there. A lot of the companies that you see that have received capital up to this point, Sanity Group, Demacan, Aleph Sana, Contourage, most of them received a large portion of their funding from American capital, Canadian capital. So now you're starting to see that pendulum swing back, and the European capital that's been conservatively sitting back and waiting is starting to come forward. So we did the very first Tallman House event in Munich in November. And we curate pitches, and we make sure that the pitches that are put out to the group are the people have been trained to give the pitch, that the decks have been gone through, it's all curated, and that it's by and large investable companies. Because there's a lot of companies, just like Imagine, everybody's got a great idea. I'm going to make a CBD legging, or I'm going to make CBD sheets, or whatever. It was mayhem for a while, and everybody was getting funded in the US. The Europeans are a little bit more conservative, and Alex has very smartly said, we're not just going to let any Tom, Dick, and Harry present. We're going to make sure that, first of all, that what they've got going on is actually going on. So looking at financials, looking at the deck, and making sure it's all curated. That saves the investors a bunch of time. Then they come, they meet each other, and then the pitch happens. And at the last one, two of the companies got funded for over $1.5 million. One for 2 million, one for $1.5 million. And another one of those, there were 4 pitching companies, is actually, having some numbers circled with some investors in the room. So it's been very exciting to see the $20-40 million raises that were going on in the US. That's not what's happening. It is happening, over in Germany, but it's coming from the Canadian LPs. The money's coming from British American Tobacco. It's coming from Philip Morris. We're seeing that stuff go on too, but it's exciting to see that entrepreneur getting $1.5 million circled for expansion or for development. That isn't happening in the US anymore. I mean, the capital is really all but dried up, other than friends and family rounds or angel investors who believe in you and your team. Over there, there's strangers sitting in the room with cash to deploy, and they just want to go about it with expert help. So they naturally come to the Tallman Group. So it's been really fun to put that together. He's having another Tallman Group event, Zurich, Switzerland, February 21st. And then the day before ICBC Berlin, on April 28th, there is a Tallman House event at the Adlon Hotel in Berlin, which is right at the Brandenburg Gate. So he's picking super luxury hotels and putting these groups of people together, and then sort of weeding out the riffraff by making you join. So, people who aren't serious about it aren't in those rooms. It's only the people who are serious that are sitting there. And that's probably why moves are being made, because everyone's comfortable.
That's super smart. I can only imagine there's a few companies that are listening to this that are like intrigued by the idea and likely interested in kind of learning more. So we'll make sure to link all that up in the show notes. So,
well, and just so you know, Tallman is spelled with one L. So if you're Googling Tallman House, make sure Tallman with one L.
Yeah, I would have missed that one.
I spelled it with two when
Jamie, 1 year from now, what has changed?
The recreational pilot program in Germany is in full swing, and cannabis is everywhere in Europe, because that's the other piece you got to remember. Germany's the size of Oregon, or a little bit smaller than my state, Montana. You got 85 million people, and you got borders all the way around. So the minute Germany goes rec, it becomes a free-for-all in Europe, and you're going to see other European governments move very quickly. A year from now, it's going to be hotter than it is today.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
How can I help you? They all come to me and they're like, can you introduce me to Kim from Trulieve? Or can you, bring me to Europe? But nobody asks me, how can I help you?
How can people help you?
They can contact the New Holland Group and hire us to do strategy work with them.
I love it. Dream smoking session, 3 people, dead or alive.
Dream smoking session. Ooh, wow. RBG. I just want to be in the same room with her. Bob Marley, and alive, probably Snoop Dogg.
Oh, that's a nice trio.
I mean, how do you not want to smoke with Snoop Dogg?
It's fair. That's a fair.
Yeah.
Last question, prediction. Do you see any key catalysts that help U.S. companies try to go over to the German market? Maybe a regulatory change, a market dynamic, or something else?
Well, I'll tell you, if we go Schedule 3 or deschedule altogether, that's going to be a game changer. Because, for example, one of the companies I'm working with right now, we're importing Moroccan hash, and getting Moroccan hash imported legally is a challenge. That's lots and lots of moving parts and legacy to legal and all that kind of stuff. It's actually the most interesting project I'm working on right now. They're wondering, well, how do we get our hash into the US? And it's such an obvious question. The two of you are like, you don't, right? I mean,
you can't, but like, yeah, you know what I mean.
I mean,
everything is hard. That seems very hard.
We're not going to be marketing.
We have, don't get me wrong, we have Moroccan hash in the US, and we know how it all gets there. But we're talking about, above board and legal. How do we get Moroccan hash into the US? Nothing comes into the US legally without a pharmaceutical license or that is hemp derived. And our hemp requirements are different than the requirements in Europe. So getting everybody on the same page, having America go legal is going to go a long way in doing that. And I think it would open up global trade. And the minute you open up global trade, you're solving all of California's problems, because all of those fantastic producers now can supply the globe. And imagine what that would look like. So I hope the US government does something finally in these 4 years. I'm not hopeful only because I really do believe that the big lobbies, alcohol, tobacco, and pharma, aren't ready for it yet. And it won't happen until they're ready because they control all the money. Prove me wrong, please. I want to be wrong about that. But I think that's what we're kind of waiting for. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I think all of those industries are trying to figure out their place in all of this before they're going to, put their foot off the neck of all of our Congress people.
That is the same thing that I think is happening.
I agree.
Same thing. Even though they told us that it's not, but I don't know if I believed him.
Yeah, they tell us lots of things.
Yeah.
It's like your parents telling you about Santa Claus,
He's real.
He is real, and I've seen him.
all of those
It's called grandparents, and they are real Santa Claus.
Well, all of the lies that we're told as children, it's done for our own benefit. And I think the same thing happens when I would like to think that when governments lie to us or when they double speak, it's because there's so many moving parts and all of the things that are happening politically. They got to find some expedient way to, walk the fine line of the truth. I think the current administration doesn't give a shit what the truth is. They're going to say whatever they want to accomplish whatever their agenda is, and they believe they're doing what's best for the U.S. And history will bear that out. We'll see what happens.
Perfectly good. So, for our listeners, they want to get in touch and they're interested in expanding over to Europe. Where can they find you?
They can find me at jboogie.22 on Instagram, Jamie L. Pearson on LinkedIn, and I will have a website go live sometime in early February. I'm working on it right now. And that'll be the new-holland.group.
We'll link it all up in the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.